Hello, you are watching Cycle, a program focused on Mongolian business and economy. My name is Batsir Namshir. The Member of Parliament of Mongolia and Chairman of Democratic Party, Mr. Erten, introduced a bill on fixing the maximum rate of loan interest in 2017. He believes that Mongolia should coordinate the loan interest through laws. He also stressed that the maximum rate of loan interest of commercial banks should be 18% per year and 1.5% per month, while non-banking financial institutions should be 35 to 36% per annum. The total amount of savings deposited in commercial banks is close to a sum of the Mongolia's national budget, and this kind of money doesn't go into economic circulation. It's only beneficial for savings holders, and it has no impact on the country's socio-economic development, entrepreneurs and economically active sectors. If we implement this law, the rate of interest for savings account will be decreased. Secondly, interest rates on banks are very high. Today, the average annual interest rate on commercial banks is about 36%. The monthly interest rate is approximately 2.5 to 3%. It's difficult for businesses to pay back the loan under the pressure of this high interest rate. We have estimated that the maximum rate of loan interest of commercial banks should be 18% per year and 1.5% per month, while non-banking financial institutions should be 35% per annum. In this case, we see that the risk is relatively low for both commercial banks and non-banking financial institutions, and it's feasible to operate on a reasonable level. When we interviewed Mr. Gabriel Stein, macroeconomic commentator and forecaster, he shared his thoughts on this issue, interest rate cap.
I think that is an extremely bad idea. I cannot warn strongly enough against it. Let me explain why. Now, first of all, I know interest rates here are quite high. You have inflation of 9%, I believe is the latest number, and yet corporate borrowing, you probably pay 18 or 19%. So it's 10% real interest rates. That is very high, but you ask yourself, why are interest rates so high? And there are a number of reasons. One is the high inflation. One is banks are having capital problems, for instance. But above all, and so I can understand why people don't like to pay high interest rates, but let me explain. Capping interest rates, setting a level above which interest rates may not go, that is like a price freeze. Now, politicians throughout history have tried to stop inflation by imposing a price freeze. It did not work for the Roman Emperor Diocletian 1700 years ago. It has not worked anywhere, anytime. More than 100 countries have tried to have a cap on interest rates. It doesn't work, and the negative effects are enormous, because what happens is, if banks can only lend at one certain type, one interest rate, they will only lend to the best risks. That means that startups, small and medium-sized enterprises, anyone who's deemed a little bit more risky will not get access to credit. There is one second category that will have any access to credit that it wants, even if they're not good risks. These are when you start looking into corruption. People who are friends of the bankers, people who happen to own the bank and who also own a company. So you have, it strangles credit, it increases corruption. Now the companies that cannot get hold of credit will then go to non-bank financial companies, what we call shadow banks. So you will expand the shadow banking system, which, because it is unregulated, means a much higher risk of financial trouble. Plus, of course, they will charge much more. So if, for argument's sake, the interest today is about 19%, and Parliament tomorrow decides that the interest is capped at 10%, you will probably find that if you are an SME or a household going to a shadow banker, let alone a loan shark, you're not paying 20%, you're paying 25, 30, 35%. So from every perspective, apart from politicians trying to gain votes by bribing voters with the voters' own money. This is a really, really bad idea, and it will be extremely bad for your banking system because it also erodes bank profitability, and if banks are unprofitable, they cannot extend more credit, and if they cannot extend more credit, ultimately the growth of the economy will slow. You can hear that I'm quite passionate about this. It worries me. Every economist will tell you this and will bring up these problems, and politicians don't like to listen. And I sincerely hope that Mongolia does not impose an interest rate cap. Believe me, if it happens, the country will very quickly have cause to regret it.
According to the budget proposal for 2020, the government revenue for next year will be 12.9 trillion Mongolian tugrks, with almost 11 trillion MNT consisting of taxes. The budget expenses have also increased to 13.9 trillion, 4.2 trillion of which is designated towards pension and social care. Moreover, 2.6 trillion MNT will go towards wages. Taking into the consideration the total revenue from sources of tax revenues, non-tax revenues, revenues from assistance, stabilization fund, future heritage fund, as well as total expenditures, which include salaries, pensions, social benefits, loan interest payment, investment, expense of products and services, repayments of loans, the state budget balance is expected to fall short of 2 trillion Mongolian tugrks, which equals to 5.1% of GDP. According to the study conducted by the Bank of Mongolia, there are 80,000 business entities registered with the government, and 60,000 of them are classified as SMEs. SMEs are only responsible for 17% of the GDP and 2.3% of total export, but employ 900,000 people, with 43% of total workforce in Mongolia. The Asian Development Bank study revealed that 89.2% of total business enterprises, 97,000, had less than 50 employees. Moreover, 90.6% of registered enterprises are micro-enterprises that have less than 10 employees. Half of the registered Mongolian enterprises do not carry out business activities and shut down. The study by the Bank of Mongolia determined that two of the biggest challenges which SMEs are facing nowadays are funding and capabilities of human resources. The government has implemented gazillions of policies, spent billions of tugrks under the so-called aim to develop an SME, but the public discovered to whom the money was allocated. 55 out of 76 members of the parliament granted the SME Development Fund loans with a 3% interest rate to directly owned or indirectly related enterprises. In the last 10 years, discounted loans amounting to 835 billion tugrks were granted to 6,000 recipients through the fund.
As an economist and also as a citizen of this country, I would really encourage people to keep going, keep talking, keep asking the questions from the government, from the parliament, from the Ministry of Food and Agriculture and Light Industry, how this fund will work in the future, how it will support real small business owners, when it will be announced, and how it will be allocated. The people really need to stand united against this huge corruption. But I'm afraid that it's just only iceberg, tip of the iceberg, I would say, because we have such a fund like this fund, other 29 funds like small, medium-sized development fund, support development fund. And there's so many things maybe going on about which we don't know. So people really need to stand against this and start to ask questions and ask the government and the parliament and the ministries to make all information transparent.
Some members of parliament submitted a trust loan or credit of trust legislation on the provision of loans of up to 20 million Mongolian Tugruks with low interest or collateral. The proposal was put forward by 12 members, many of whom were involved with SME fund embezzlement. By their estimate, this new fund would require 200 to 300 billion Mongolian Tugruks. Experts say that this is a clear indicator of next year's parliament election drawing closer. Mongolia is ranked at 81st in Doing Business 2020 World Bank Group, the 17th in a series of annual studies investigating the regulations that enhance business activity and those that constrain it. The project, launched in 2002, looks at domestic, small and medium-sized companies and measures the regulations applying to them through their life cycle. Doing Business captures several important dimensions of the regulatory environment as it applies to local firms. It provides quantitative indicators on regulation for starting a business, dealing with construction permits, getting electricity, registering property, getting credit, protecting minority investors, paying taxes, trading cross borders, enforcing contracts, and resolving insolvency. The first study, published in 2003, covered 5 indicator sets and 133 economies. This year's study covers 11 indicator sets and 190 economies. Mongolia is ranked at 81st. Starting a business, 100th. Dealing with construction permits, 29th. Getting electricity, 122nd. Registering property, 50th. Getting credit, 25th. Protecting minority investors, 25th. Paying taxes, 71st. Trading across borders, 143rd. Enforcing contracts, 75th. Resolving insolvency, 150th. The importance of a clear, consistent policy on investment was highlighted at the international conference held under the theme Investment Climate and Stability on October 22nd. The conference was co-organized by the Bank of Mongolia, International Finance Corporation, and the National Development Agency. While foreign investment in Mongolia was $1.5 billion in 2016, it reached $2.7 billion USD with an increase of 90% in 2018. Furthermore, entities with foreign investment made up 23% of the total tax revenue in 2018. However, as there is a potential risk of economic difficulties due to the fluctuating rate of export commodities, officials highlighted the possibility to overcome the difficulties with direct foreign investment and increase in exports. Head of the Cabinet Secretariat Oyun Erten said the specific goals and objectives on regaining investors' confidence and attracting investment have been reflected in the government's plan for 2016 to 2020. In order to implement these goals, we are currently working on creating a favorable environment for new investors, protecting their rights, and introducing the best international practices. Governor of the Bank of Mongolia, Baytsekhan, said, as of the first half of 2019, GDP grew by 7.3%. Despite this, the fluctuating rate of raw commodities and foreign debt risks continue to be problematic. Thus, to attract investment and find additional sources for programs on increasing the competitiveness of export products and diversifying the economy, creation of a favorable investment environment is currently the most important issue. Head of the National Development Agency of Mongolia, Baytsekhan, said, in partnership with the International Financial Corporation of the World Bank, the National Development Agency has developed a report on the investment reform of Mongolia. The policy paper on attracting investment is currently being developed based on the report. It's highly important to define the vision for the sectors that will serve as a pillar of development, foreign investment, and human resource and personnel 20 to 30 years into the future. In this framework, the National Development Agency has begun to work on defining the vision for up to 2051. IFC's resident representative in Mongolia, Rufat Ali Mardanov, said, Alongside foreign investment and localization of know-how, it will be crucial to have a policy on investing in increasing domestic business opportunities. Our research showed that Mongolia is able to benefit the most from investments in sectors such as mining, tourism, services and agriculture. We are eager to give support in creating opportunities in the sectors and realizing possible opportunities. Ministry of Food, Agriculture and Light Industry of Mongolia, Asian Development Bank Mongolia and Mongolian Wool and Cashmere Association jointly organized a Mongolian Noble Fiber International High-Level Forum on October 24th. The representatives of global brands, consumers, foreign embassies in Ulaanbaatar, domestic producers, governmental and non-governmental organizations, international projects took part in the event to discuss the issues regarding the cashmere and wool industry of Mongolia. Thanks to Kashmir Program, approved by the government of Mongolia, 1,570 new workplaces have been created, increasing the production capacity by 30% and sales volume by 27%. There are more than 300 entities are engaged in wool and cashmere production of Mongolia. Most of them are exporting their final products with total annual sales reaching 1.3 trillion Mongolian togruks. One of the outcomes of the Kashmir program is a Kashmir Quality Certification Mark, Mongolian Noble Fiber, which was introduced at the event. The Mongolian Noble Fiber Certification Mark was created to serve an important role in promoting Mongolian cashmere, yak fiber and wool to the world and creating a national brand by developing its competitiveness through certifying its quality. It certifies that product is made with 100% high-quality wool and cashmere sourced from Mongolia, meets Mongolian and international ISO standards for textiles and woven products. At the forum, 3 Mongolian companies, Gobi, Jinstmurung and Hamburg, received the certification mark. Mongolia's unemployment rate fell to 10.1% in the second quarter of 2019, down from 11.8% in the first quarter of the year. Despite the high unemployment rate, some sectors say they are facing a severe lack of qualified professionals in the workforce. We have details in the following report. Industry experts forecast that over the next 5 years, the wool and cashmere knitwear industry will be responsible for creating 10,000 new jobs. However, the industry is currently lacking an experienced workforce. Some businesses in the industry are willing to pay salaries of at least 1.3 million Mongolian togruks per month, roughly $486, which is higher than salaries for some public servants.
According to my research, a knitting machine operator can earn up to 2.5 million Mongolian togruks, or $930 per month. In a big factory, monthly salaries range from 1.8 to 2 million togruks.
If someone wants to pursue a career in light industry, they don't really need to pursue a university education. In the case of Batniam, he graduated from a short-term course at a vocational training center and he's being paid a better salary than some public servants. Well, that's all for now. It was Cycle, MNB World's economic and business program. Thanks for being with us. See you next time.